About a week ago, I made a video on IAU and said how this basically does nothing to majority of tanks you put it on. And I still stand by that video. I still stand by that opinion of it. Also in that video, DarkNinja left a comment saying how the bloom reduction from IAU is actually better than IRM if you are going at full speed. And he's even gone and made 2 videos on the subject, and I recommend that you go and watch them. I'll link them down below in the description. Because when IRM was first introduced into the game, I was under the opinion that it was technically useless because you don't gain the dispersion benefit. You're only turning faster, and that they would cancel each other out. And there wasn't really any information out there to say one or the other is true, whether or not they cancel each other out or if they just give you a dispersion buff. So I went ahead and asked Wargaming. I said, does IRM cancel each other out, or do you get the dispersion benefit? Now I received this reply. This is mostly a module for turretless TDs to make them turn quicker. So increasing the speed has nothing to do with increased dispersion, and you will still get the dispersion benefit. Now that to me made it sound like IRM in a current game doesn't work the way they think it does. So I made a full video explaining this, but before I clicked publish, I sent it to the same person to make sure that everything was actually correct. And it turns out, no, I just misread it. They sent back, traverse dispersion bonus is there to cancel out bigger dispersion you get from faster traverse speed. The only time you will get better stabilization, or the only time where you should get better stabilization, is when you are driving forwards or backwards. So IRM is working, okay? It isn't broken. It works as intended. They should be cancelling each other out. So now that we have all the information, I have done testing, and we are going to go through all of the equipment that helps out with the bloom and how bloom is affected by speed. So to do this, I went on my press account, got the Caliban, which is very notorious for having bad dispersion values. I made sure there was absolutely nothing else that could assist the gun handling besides the piece of equipment that I was testing in that given game. So there's no consumables, there is no crew skills, there are no field mods, as you can see. Absolutely nothing that could be of assistance to the gun handling. The only thing that I would do is I would put the stab, I would put whatever it might be into the slot and then go into the game. Once in a private match in Himmelsdorf, I went in and got to a same point on each game. I then tested the turret dispersion by doing a 360 while looking at the wall, and then as it comes back around, I can then see the bloom for the turret dispersion. For the tank traverse, I then just looked at the same wall, turned the tank until my reticle was off my screen. It had already reached fully bloom even before it reaches the end of the screen. And for the moving, I again lined myself up with roughly the same place that I was looking before, and then just drove towards it. These 3 tests hit every single point for the bloom in the game. You have the moving, you have the turret traverse, and the tank traverse. What I then did is put everything into DaVinci Resolve, which is my editing software that I use, and then I cut it at the exact frame that it hits my reticle. So as you know, this little circle will come all the way around from the left, and then as soon as it reaches here, because it's hit the point that I'm going to start aiming, I then cut it, and that is the full bloom circle. And then I've lined up every single one of these so that they are all in line, and you'll see the different circle sizes. Now, obviously, this is not a completely fair test because I cannot get into the pixel perfect point each time. So there is going to be a little bit of blur around the outside, but the reticle should still be at least close enough so that you can see the difference. Now, the things that I tested are standard V-stub, which will become clear why in a second, Bond IRM, Bounty IAU, Experimental Turbo, and Bounty Turbo. Now, the reason why I used the standard V-stab is because it gives minus 20%. The Bond IRM gives minus 17.5%, which means if the dispersion values were simply just reducing the dispersion and not increasing the whole traverse or anything like that, then you would get very, very close to the standard V-stab. So this should really show you the difference between IRM and V-stab. So starting off with V-stab, as you can see, it will give you a nice clean 20% decrease to the dispersion. If we go ahead and put IAU in this, you'll see that it's directly in the middle, or at least roughly, it's 8%, so nearly in the middle. If we put in Bond IRM, it's much closer to no equipment than it is to V-stab, or even IAU. If we just remove IAU and V-stab for a second, this is the Bond IRM versus no equipment. That is very, very close. And that is purely because they cancel each other out. You get the increased traverse speed, you get the decreased dispersion, and the exact same number is the same each time, so they cancel each other out cleanly. Experimental turbo is exactly the same as having no equipment, purely because they cancel each other out again. You get 6% increase, you get 6% decrease in dispersion. And Bounty Turbo is exactly the same as having no equipment. The reason being is that it doesn't touch the turret traverse speed. So it wouldn't increase the speed, therefore it wouldn't increase the bloom. So going at full speed, IAU is better than IRM in turret dispersion. Next up, tank traverse dispersion. This is where we will turn the tank until the reticle goes off of the screen. Now it is cut in a way that it has reached maximum bloomage, and then I've got them as close as I possibly can. Because of the way that this is, it's quite annoying because one, you're going to turn faster with the turbos, and you'll also turn faster with IRM. So it can be quite annoying to line them up perfectly because of the increased speed. Either way, you can clearly see the difference in all of these. So let's go ahead and start with V-Stab. As you can see, a nice clean 20% decrease in the dispersion from no equipment at all. If we go ahead and add in Bond IRM, you'll see that, yep, it's pretty much the exact same thing from the turret dispersion. In fact, you can see it even more pronounced now because there is the rings being much bigger, so you can clearly see the difference between no equipment and IRM. If we then add in IAU, you'll see that that is, again, about 8%. And if we remove Bond IRM, yep, that is pretty much exactly what you would be expecting. So what about experimental turbo? Again, this is with no equipment, and if we add in the experimental turbo, it's bigger. But now there's very good reason for this, because if you remember what experimental turbo does, it increases the traverse speeds and then also decreases the bloom. However, it doesn't touch the engine power. And because you are going faster, you are going to have more bloom. So the engine power is actually what is affecting this right here. And I can prove it because if we do Bounty Turbo on top of this, the circle is even bigger. And that is purely because it doesn't have any dispersion benefits. So experimental turbo is working, but you need to remember that when you increase the engine power, you are also then increasing the bloom. Now for the moving dispersion, I lined them up against this wall, and every single one of them is lined up along the reticle. So as you know, yep, this is all going to be a bit blurry because I can't get them exactly perfect with where I'm looking, but they're all lined up along the reticle line. And the way this works is that I'll just simply drive forwards until they all reach full dispersion bloom and then stop it around about there. So I've reached a point where they have all got maximum bloom, and we're going to start out with V-Stab. So as you can see, simple 20% decrease from the no equipment line right here to then the V-Stab line. If we then add in Bond IRM, you'll see that it is completely different from what we were originally looking at with the other two tests. And this is purely because IRM doesn't improve the engine power or top speed. So it has nothing that it would need to cancel out each other. So on the move dispersion, IRM is much, much better than IAU, for example. If we add in IAU, you'll see that that is much, much closer to what no equipment is than it is to V-Stab. Again, directly in the middle still. So IAU is definitely consistent at maximum speeds, but not as good as IRM if you're on the move. Now, if we add in experimental turbo to this from the no equipment, it is bigger. Again, because of the increased engine power and top speed. But it is still smaller than the Bounty Turbo because obviously experimental turbo does gain the benefit of the dispersion values. So experimental turbo definitely does have its place, and it definitely does work, as you can tell. But it doesn't work in the way that a lot of people might think it does, where you will get better gun handling with the turbo. It's just not true. You will get worse gun handling with an experimental turbo than you would with another piece of equipment such as IRM, IAU, or anything like that. So for everyone that has gone out and said, okay, well, I want the ultimate gun handling build, you shouldn't be putting a turbo on it at all, because a turbo is always going to increase the bloom. Apart from turret dispersion, that won't increase. And I did one final test just to show you the difference between experimental turbo, Bond turbo, and Bounty turbo with the turning speed. And here you go. As you can see, one of them is going quite a bit faster than the other. And there is even, right here, I think it is, you can quite clearly see that there are 3 gun barrels There's one here, and one here. And if we remove the Bond turbo, the Bounty turbo, we are then left with the one that is leading, and that is the experimental turbo. So it definitely does turn faster, even than the Bond turbo. So there you go. That should be everything you need to know about bloom dispersion and how the equipment all works. Thank you very much to DarkNinja for informing me about them, because I definitely learned something, and I definitely learned something from testing it as well. So make sure to check out his video, it'll be in the description, and let me know if you found this useful. I'll see you all in the next one.